Hey guys, Zomfox here, and it is time to do my Week 4 game picks for the 2024 United Football League season. So far this season, it's been off to a pretty good start in my overall picks. I've seen that I've been doing pretty well, especially compared to other channels who do stuff like this or other news sites that do this. So, without further ado, let's just get right into this week where we have the first regional coverage game, meaning that most people are not going to be able to watch every single game this week. So let's get started with the first two games, or kind of one and a half. So the first game is the Showboats versus Battlehawks on Saturday, April 20th. With the Battlehawks being a -7 favorite, the over-under is 45.5, and they are -345 favorites versus the Showboats +275. This is a bit of a shocker. I did not expect to see a 7 in that spread, especially compared to the DC Birmingham game at 8, considering the fact that the difference between the Stallions and the Defenders is a lot bigger of a difference than the Battlehawks versus the Showboats. Yeah, this is a tough one. But I will say this one doesn't. Last week's game felt like a sucker's bet. This one really doesn't. The fact is, like I said, that the Showboats are not this much worse team than the Battlehawks. The fact is the Battlehawks pass rush is not as good as the Stallions pass rush, even though, granted, because the Showboats offensive line is still bad, even though they're trying to fix it. The fact is that the Battlehawks are probably going to get 3 or 4 sacks at least. But it's not as good as the Stallions' defensive line. So the Case Cookus obliteration, saying they do decide to keep Case as the starter, which is what everybody expects, it really shouldn't be as bad as last week. And the fact is that even then, the Showboats are still able to play decent. It's just that when their defense is on the field the entire game, there's only so much they can do. But I think the Battlehawks win. I think the Battlehawks win this game 30-24. I think this is a much closer game than the +7. Well, not much closer, but I think the Showboats keep this within a straight touchdown. But I do think it's an over. The fact is that neither defense has really done anything to make me go, oh, that's a great defense. The Battlehawks still have not impressed me on defense. As the game against the Brahmas, now there's the massive question of, was Garbers hurt early on? Is that why they kept on doing really bad play calling, whether it be 2-yard passes or short runs? The fact is, even then, the Battlehawks defense has not impressed me this year. The Showboats defense has not impressed me this year. So I think that it's going to be a higher scoring game. Now, I don't think it's going to be crazy like 40-40 type game, but I think that it is going to be a 30-24. I think the difference is going to be that the Showboats offensive line is not going to be able to fully handle the Battlehawks defensive line, and because of that, they're able to get some pass rushes, kind of stall a drive or two of the Showboats, and end the game 30-24. Especially because the Showboats still have some questionable play calling and just overall plays in the red zone, which mainly is because they're horrid rushing attack, which maybe gets fixed. They released Trey Williams, really shocking. I don't really get it. The fact is that it makes no sense to me. Look, Trey Williams is a really good running back. It's just that they didn't use him at all, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. You cut him because you didn't even give him a chance. I don't know. We'll see. I think the Showboats keep this one closer than the +7, but only by a point. I think the Battlehawks do win it. Then the Defenders versus the Stallions. Yeah, +8 is pretty wild. The Stallions are -8, 8-point favorites. The over-under is 47, as now that we had last week, which had a lot of over games, are now at that point where the over-under is a lot higher than at the start of the season. And the Stallions are -410 versus the +320 for the Defenders. All right, let's not beat around the bush. The Stallions are, it's to the point now where you have to just go with both of them until proven otherwise. So I'm going to say the Stallions win this 27-17. The Showboats were +7 last week. They weren't even close to covering. And the fact is the Defenders, look, even in their win last week, they put up a lot of points, but it was against the Renegades defense, which is not impressive at all. The Stallions defense is the best defense they have played by far this season. The fact is that I think this is going to be an under. I think the Stallions' offense isn't going to be as crazy. I know, the unofficial depth chart had Matt Corral as a starter, but I think everybody understands that was a very unofficial depth chart because it's the same as week 2, I believe, or something like that. The point is that there's no way Martinez has that good a game again. And if they do end up using Corral at all, they're not going to be the same offense. They're still going to put up a decent amount of points in 27. But I think the Defenders are not going to put up 20. I think the fact is that when you look at what they've done, it's just hard to think that they're really going to go out there and, dominate a team. The fact is that the Defenders' offense did against the Roughnecks defense, which got absolutely obliterated by the Panthers' offense. And then they just had a good game against the Renegades defense, but guess what? Literally everybody has a good game against the Renegades defense so far. So it's just all of it's leading up to a Stallions blowout win. Again, would I be super shocked if the Defenders cover? No, but it's to the point now where it's just like with the power rankings, just like with picking a team. You're kind of forced to pick the Stallions -8 until, or as the favorite and on the spread, until a team can actually prove that, hey, they actually can compete with them. Because even the Panthers, if I'm not mistaken, even though it was by half a point, the Panthers still didn't even cover, and that was like a 6.5 point, so or something like that. So the fact is that you have to go with the Stallions. They're the best team in spring football by a country mile at this point. Until they lose, they are the best team by a mile because they just don't lose. They're riding a 10-game win streak, I believe it is at this point. So Stallions win this game 27-17. Now the other 7 p.m. game on Saturday that other people are going to get is the Michigan Panthers versus the San Antonio Brahmas. This is not shocked at all really by it. +1 for the Panthers, -1 for the Brahmas. Over-under is 41, -110. Brahmas are the home team. I'm not really shocked at this. I mean, look, the fact is that it's -1. You know, the NFL rules, I believe it's like 3.5 points goes to the home team. So if you want to view that, you technically can say the Panthers are favorites. But as I've said before, I don't really buy that argument for spring football. Over-under 41 makes sense. The Brahmas are missing their starting quarterback in Chase Garbers, and they're going to have to now rely on Quinton Dormady, who's a very polarizing quarterback. Some people say he was really good on a bad team. Some people say he was a bad quarterback and that he was carried by a guy like Cody Latimer. Others are like me and say, you know, he was good, but I'd rather have a guy like Jalen McClendon. The fact is that the Panthers probably win this game. They probably win this, I'm saying like 30-24, which might be a bit high, some people might expect, but I actually think Dormady is going to do a pretty decent job. But I think the Panthers win this game. +1 goes to the Panthers. Over-under 41, I think it's going to be an over. I think this is the Suckers Bet of the Week at 41 for, you know, saying like, you know, it's going to be an under. I don't think so. And -110. Look, the fact is that so far, I don't have a reason to say the Brahmas defense is better than the Roughnecks defense. I just don't. The Roughnecks defense had a couple big players do a lot of damage to the Showboats. And when you compare what they did to the defenders versus what the Brahmas did to the defenders, where 2 TDs got canceled off by the defenders from a penalty on their right tackle, it's kind of hard to look at the Brahmas defense and say, yeah, that's a way better unit than the Roughnecks defense. Especially when you consider the fact the Roughnecks defense before the Panthers game, which admittedly, the defense took a couple of hits after that game. But I think that overall, it's hard to go against it. Which team is the better defense? It's the Panthers, no question. Which team is the better special teams unit? It's the Panthers. The Brahmas barely kick any field goals. And at the end of the day, when you look at the Panthers, they have Jake Bates, who basically it's either do you prefer consistency or not consistency? Do you prefer quantity over quality? If you prefer quantity, Matt McCrane is the best kicker in the league. You prefer quality, since like all of his kicks are 50-yard plus, you have Bates. And the fact is, last week, it's at this point, the better quarterback is E.J. Perry. E.J. Perry just is coming off an incredible game versus a guy that hasn't played, you know, spring football in a while since last year's XFL season. But I do think the Brahmas are able to actually keep this one close. I think a lot of people might expect this to be a blowout for the Panthers' favor. I don't really think it's going to be a blowout. I do think Dormady is going to be a solid player, but the fact is you're putting him right in the fire against a really good Panthers defense. And when you consider what the Stallions did in Week 1 against a terrible Renegades defense, and then Week 3 against a very underachieving Showboats defense, versus what they did in Week 2 against the Panthers defense is just, it's had a knack for just, you know, stopping teams. I mean, even the Roughnecks, I mean, it got to the point where the Panthers defense didn't even have to try that hard because they were already up 2 scores, and even then they only allowed like 20 points. So I think the Brahmas put up 24, which if they put that up, that's an incredible effort by the Brahmas. It's just hard to say the Brahmas are going to win this game when, I mean, they just are missing their starting quarterback. They're missing their starting center. It's just hard to see them win this. Would I be shocked if they win? No. I think the -1 +1 is a very good spread. I think it makes sense. This is basically a pick'em game. But at the same time, I'm going to pick the Panthers to win this. It's just, when you look at everything, it's just like when I did with the Battlehawks versus the Brahmas last week. When you looked at it objectively, the Brahmas were the worst team, so I picked the Battlehawks. This week, the Panthers are the better team. I'm picking the Panthers to win this game, so Panthers win 30-24. And then the Tank Bowl. Yes, sir, the Tank Bowl. By the way, if you did not see my community post yesterday, at 1:45 EST on Sunday, this is April 21st, I will be going live as I'm going to be live streaming this game, as I'm going to be naturally watching it. And I'm assuming with some of you guys, or some of you guys that don't have FS1, you guys can, you know, watch the stream and kind of be watching the game. So 1:45 on Sunday, I will be live streaming this game in my first live stream on the channel. Now, as for is the Renegades versus the Roughnecks, this is the Tank Bowl. These are 2 0-3 teams, the only 2 winless teams in the league. The Renegades are -3 favorites despite being on the road. The over-under is 46.5, and the money line is 155- for the Renegades, plus 130 for the Roughnecks. This is going to be a game. Look, I think it's It's so funny that this is the game that's on FS1. I believe FS1 is like one game and this is it. That's hilarious that this is the one on it because you're going to lock the poo-poo game on the poo-poo network, essentially. It's kind of the funny way to view it. Look, the fact is that the Renegades Roughnecks game, the Renegades are just such a better team. The only caveat is Mark Thompson was a full participant in practice this week. There's a very good, granted we've said this for 2 weeks now, but legitimately from what Coach CJ said, from where the season is, because let's just put it this way. I'll talk about this as well during the live stream. Whoever loses this game is basically eliminated from the playoffs. Let's just call it like it is. You start the season 0-4, you're going to have to basically win 6 straight games, or at least 5 of 6. And yes, that is doable, but it's going to be an insane challenge. So whoever loses this game is basically eliminated from the playoffs. I mean, it just is what it is. Let's say the Stallions win on Saturday. That means that they're 4-0. If the Roughnecks lose, they're 0-4. That means just catching up to the Stallions is basically impossible at that point already. And the Renegades is very similar. They could very well have they could have all 3 teams be 3-1 in there. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the Renegades win this game. But I will say it's by 1 point. I think that the fact is the Renegades have a knack for losing games on one play. Whether it's midway through the game, the Deion Kane touchdown week 1, or a couple of last-second field goals, they just find a way to break your heart, but I think this time it's the opposite. I do think the Roughnecks cover at +3. I do think they hit the over at 46.5. The Renegades defense is horrid. And even though Andre St. Amour should be activated by then, I'd imagine, I don't know if he's enough to save him. Mark Thompson is back for the Roughnecks. We saw last year he was hurt in the first game back. Immediately changed the team. So I think that it is going to have a very similar impact. It's not going to be as dominant, but I think it's going to be overall solid. I think the Renegades are able to win this game. I think they're able to win at 28-27. And it's going to be a wild one. It is a tank bowl. Whoever loses this game, basically eliminated from the playoffs, barring an immaculate second-half season comeback. Which, again, we saw the Gamblers when it was like 4 or 5 straight last year. I can't remember between them and the Showboats both had win streaks. So it is doable. But if you start the season 0-4, especially in a very highly competitive league like the UFL, yeah, your chances of really doing anything are slim to none. So that'll do it for my picks. Now, overall record-wise, last week was a weaker week, but still overall really solid. Now, the over-under took a bit of a hit. We're 8-3 there now. Moneyline is actually above 500 now. I went like 3-1 last week, as I only got the Renegades wrong, but the spread, not as good, 7-4, but overall still really solid numbers, 7-4, 8-3, 7-5. I did not add to any of the other ones, though. I did not get any team's prediction right, and I did not get any game perfectly betted. I got a couple close, but whether it was the over-under or was it the spread, I missed them. The Panthers Roughnecks game, I believe I missed the under. I picked under, it went over, and then the Stallions Showboats was the spread on the Showboats. But overall, still doing really solid. I don't believe I've had anything that's been absolutely horrid in terms of a full day. So we're off to a good start. Hopefully we can continue this up, because now we're getting to the point where it's a bit harder to predict, and upsets can be a huge deterrent. Like if you have a team, like if you have the Defenders Stallions game end up being like either a complete shootout, or you have, the Battlehawks game be an absolute snore fest, it could change a lot. But that'll do it. This has been Zom Fox. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified as soon as I upload any videos. Remember, on Sunday, 1:45, I will be live streaming the Renegades Roughnecks UFL Tank Bowl. So be on the lookout for that. And as always, have a great night.